So I think my parents did an amazing job with raising me by uh, allowing me to grow into a human being that doesn't view or does not see the outside world in the way that it actually is, right? Sort of this sort of cruel gray rock, nothing to the outside world. But for the most part, I lived in a home that was very loving, and they actually cared and sacrificed in all ways, right, for honoring that particular family. It was in many ways an ideal, even though that my parents were very strict. It was sort of an ideal upbringing to grow as a person, to know that the world is within that particular unit. um, you can grow and develop. But if I was exposed to sort of the cruelty of the outside world, which they themselves were very much exposed to that. And I look back and I think, holy cow, I don't know how they got through a lot of family tragedy, including, a death of their, oldest, their oldest daughter, uh, through something very tragic. She was murdered. And yet, when I was there and part of all of this, I felt a lot of love and a lot of sort of security and to grow as a person. And so I think, like, as me as a person, I viewed the world in a very sort of loving way, I guess, in a very pretty naive way. And then, as I've sort of grown and interacted with the world, as the older I've gotten, I've realized, like, man, that is such a rare scenario. And even most people are not raised in families that way, that have the support that they actually have. And so I have learned that all of those people that grew up in families that didn't have that support, didn't have the family unit, which is most people. I strongly believe that is a big chunk of most people, did not have a supportive family in various different ways. They end up growing and becoming adults, and those people are the ones that you interact with. And most people, they don't get help in terms of managing the emotions and managing this sort of process. And they just kind of try to deal with this themselves, and they go into all sorts of different directions, and to become a functioning, growing human being as an adult is surprisingly rare. That people are growing and developing and focused on that sort of self actualization and all that kind of stuff, because they're sort of I believe that the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you have these sort of different needs. If you haven't looked it up, it's actually pretty interesting, where it's like this pyramid of needs, where you have the base is survival, and just getting along, and then the sort of top is self-actualization, where you're actually looking at how I could develop as a human being. And getting to that moment of sort of self-actualization requires you to satisfy a lot of other things that are going on, and us as human beings are sort of fascinated. I'm thinking about all the other things, the sort of survival and all these other needs, rather than being, how can I become a better person, and how can I sort of achieve the best potential that I can. Um, and so the vast majority of people are sort of struggling at various different levels of that. Um, and what I want to point out is that as you're interacting with the world, right? And if you're naive like me, like grew up, and man, I look back and it was very idealistic in a lot of ways. Um, and you're interacting with the world, and you realize that the world is not necessarily, the world is pretty cruel. um, then you need to sort of take a step back and sort of recalibrate and build that unit within yourself and within the people that you choose to bring in within that small little circle, to protect yourself from that cruel outside world, right? Where people are not nice. If we just think of simple distributions, right? There's going to be um, you know, people that are, there's going to be 60% of the people that are neutral, maybe 50% that are neutral, and then there's going to be 20% on either end that are, super nice and super well intentioned, and then 20% on the other end that are just like cruel and mean. And the problem is you don't know who those people are, right? You can't see those particular people. We come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Some people are sort of present themselves in a cruel and mean way, but they're actually really kind and generous individuals, right? Or they present themselves and um, very nice, but they're actually very strategic and transactional underneath. And you have to realize that there's layers and layers and layers. So we spend a great deal of effort. Psychologists spend a great deal of effort sort of identifying all of these characteristics and traits and things that evolve over time, like all this kind of stuff, right? And it's just a big mess of what human beings are. But I want to dumb it down in sort of a binary sense, where people are sort of kind and generous, versus those that are more cruel and sort of just you know not necessarily caring, right? And if you bring it down to that, you realize that, yeah, you're going to bump into a lot of people like that. And you can't forecast who those people are, and you can't forecast the sort of positions, all in all walks of life. So the only thing that you can do is to protect yourself, right? And have that very small group. And the reason why I say very small, because I think that's all you can handle. There's a very tiny small group of maybe you and no more than a half a dozen people, um, that are in this particular core, and you're protecting it, and you're making sure that you are handling the outside, cruel outside world within that particular unit, where you're caring for each other. You're making sure that you're doing okay, right? You're making sure that you're getting all of the check marks of what it means to be a growing, self-actualizing human being, and ignoring the sort of cruelty of the outside world. Um, and I think that's an important lesson that we all have to sort of learn as we grow through life. Is how do we become um, okay, given that the world is not necessarily nice all the time, and we have to sort of process this, um, and realize that, hey, you know what, uh, I can be okay, and I could do this myself. I simply have to protect all these things that allow me to function, and protecting those things, putting up those boundaries that allow you to function, whatever those are, right? There's a series of things that make you who you are, whether you're an artist, whether you like to paint, so you have to that, or whatever, right? There are all these kind of things that make you whole and complete. You protect those things, right? And you sacrifice for those particular things, knowing that the rest of the world is not going to understand it. So, all right, take care. Have a wonderful day.